Why did I receive a letter from my late mother-in-law? I was shocked as I looked at the envelope that had just arrived in my home mailbox. The letter was from my mother-in-law, who we had just buried yesterday. She had always been very kind to me since I married her son, and I loved her a lot. We often went out to eat, enjoyed shopping trips, and became close like friends, despite being different ages. Her sudden death left me heartbroken, and even after her funeral, I was still struggling to accept that she was gone. Getting a letter from her during this sad time was a huge surprise. I quickly opened the letter and found something unexpected. My mother-in-law had asked a temple priest to send me this letter after she passed away. The letter told me to find a secret compartment in the family's old chest and revealed a hidden door. It gave detailed instructions on how to open this hidden door and made it clear I should do this alone. Seeing that my brother-in-law, his wife, and their kids were all out, I rushed to my in-laws' house. Using the spare key, I went in and followed the instructions to open the secret compartment by myself. "It's open," I sighed with relief and looked inside. "My name is Betty, I'm 40 years old, and I work from home as a web designer. I married Kevin, who is 5 years older than me, 6 years ago. We met through a friend and are still very close. However, we haven't been able to have children yet. Both of us love kids and wanted to start a family soon after getting married, but it hasn't happened. I used to feel very sad about this, but there was always someone who was kind to me despite it all. My mother-in-law. "Betty, don't worry so much. There's no need to rush," she would say. "Hey, how about we go to the new waffle place near the station for a change?" My mother-in-law always encouraged me and spoke comforting words. She was bright, kind, and caring, and I loved her deeply. She often helped me, and over time, I worried less about not having children. Though I still want children, I've decided not to go for intensive infertility treatments, but to let things happen naturally. Since my husband Kevin often travels for work, my mother-in-law and I usually go out to eat or shop together when he's away. We've grown close, just like friends, despite our age difference. She lives nearby with my brother-in-law's family, who have 4 children. Although she gets along well with them, my brother-in-law and his wife often insult my husband and me for not having children. "Betty, you haven't had any children yet. We have 4 lovely kids here. Being childless is unfilial. Cut ties with your mother-in-law soon," Lisa, my brother-in-law's wife, would say smugly, and my brother-in-law Brian would agree, saying, "Lisa's right." Well, Kevin has never been impressive anyway. Even if you had kids, they wouldn't amount to much. Initially, my husband and I would respond to such cruel remarks from my brother-in-law's family. However, since they never listened, we gradually stopped reacting and tried to avoid them as much as possible. They treat us disrespectfully but act very nicely in front of my mother-in-law. We haven't told her about their behavior to avoid causing her worry. One holiday, my husband, my mother-in-law, and I planned to go out for a meal together. When we arrived at my parents-in-law's house, she wasn't waiting outside as usual. "Is she not ready yet?" I wondered aloud. "She should be coming out soon," my husband replied. We didn't think much of it and waited. However, as time passed 10 minutes, then 15, she still didn't appear or answer her phone. I wondered what was going on with your mom. I started feeling uneasy and increasingly anxious. We rang the doorbell of my parents-in-law's house, but there was no response. We decided to use the spare key to enter. "Hey, Mom," my husband called out as he took off his shoes at the entrance, but still there was no reply from inside. With a bad feeling, we quickly searched for my mother-in-law, and then we found her collapsed in her bedroom. "Oh my God!" I exclaimed as I rushed to her side, and my husband immediately called for an ambulance. It seemed that my brother-in-law's family was out because no one else was at the house besides my mother-in-law. The ambulance arrived in about 15 minutes, and she was swiftly taken to the hospital, but unfortunately she passed away there. It was a stroke. My husband and I were heartbroken by the sudden loss, and we cried a lot. Despite our grief, we knew there were many things to do, like preparing for her funeral. The funeral was to be a family affair, and my brother-in-law took on the role of the chief mourner. To honor my mother-in-law, my husband and I worked together with him on the preparations. However, even during the planning with relatives and discussions with the funeral home, my brother-in-law seemed reluctant and showed no signs of grief. He did his duties at the wake and funeral, but often he would call my husband over after talking briefly with relatives and then abruptly leave, which offended them. During the post-funeral gathering with relatives, my brother-in-law was the first to sit down and refused to get up even when my husband urged him to greet the guests. He just sat there drinking his beer, and his wife did the same. So my husband and I went around, thanking the relatives for coming and sharing memories of my mother-in-law. Seeing his parents just eating and drinking seemed to set a negative tone for the gathering. My brother-in-law's 4 children were busy playing games, laughing loudly and playfully nudging each other, creating a mood that didn't seem right for after a funeral. None of my brother-in-law's family seemed sad about my mother-in-law's death. The other relatives noticed this and didn't try to talk to my brother-in-law and his wife. They just said goodbye and shared memories with my husband and me. Despite the obvious change in the relatives' attitudes, my brother-in-law's family didn't seem to care. They kept ordering more beer, talked about inheritances, and planned trips, even though we were supposed to be mourning. It was disrespectful, considering how much my mother-in-law had done for them while she was alive. I couldn't help but look at them with disapproval. The next day, my husband left early for some errands, and I was at home planning to check the mailbox for the newspaper. That's when I noticed a letter. Wondering who it could be from, I saw it was addressed to me. To my surprise, it was from my mother-in-law. Opening the letter in the living room, I found something unexpected. The letter said that my mother-in-law had arranged with a temple priest to send it after she passed away. It had instructions on how to open a hidden compartment in a chest and the contact details of the family lawyer. There was also a note to make sure I opened it by myself. I read my mother-in-law's letter over and over. Though she was slender, her handwriting was bold and strong. I took a deep breath, touched by the strong strokes of her writing that reflected her strong character. Glancing at the clock, it was 8:20. No one should be at my in-laws' house now. The kids would be at school, and according to a social media post by my brother-in-law's wife, they had left early that morning. With this in mind, I quickly got ready to go to the family home. This morning I saw that they were planning an outing together. They even sent their children to school, even though it was the day after our grandmother's funeral. They seemed eager to enjoy their day off. If their post was accurate, there should be nobody at the family home. I realized I had to go now, or I might not get another chance. When I used the spare key to open the front door of my in-laws' house, I entered slowly. It was sad that my mother-in-law, who always greeted me with a smile, wasn't here. Holding my aching chest, I went into her room. The chest, an old piece that belonged to my mother-in-law, opened smoothly, perhaps because she took care of it. Just as the letter said, I found a hidden door at the back of a drawer. Thank goodness it's open. I sighed in relief as I managed to open it safely. Inside, there was another document along with what was written in the letter. What is this? I stared at the documents, feeling my mother-in-law's love and tears almost spilling. I felt like staying there and crying, but I had to leave quickly. It wouldn't be good if someone came back and saw me, especially since the letter said to do this alone. After returning home with all the documents, I contacted the family lawyer mentioned in the letter to inform them of my mother-in-law's passing. Just as I was about to reach out to my husband and my brother-in-law's family to see if we could all gather this weekend, I received an email. It was from my sister-in-law, urging us to meet at my in-laws' house this weekend for some important news. Despite feeling uneasy, declining seemed odd, so I agreed to her proposal. Over the weekend, I went to my in-laws' house with my husband, feeling nervous about the discussion. My brother-in-law and his wife had smug looks, and their 4 children were not around, probably taken somewhere else. As soon as we sat down, they presented a document. "This is the will left by my mother-in-law," my sister-in-law announced loudly. The signature on the will was indeed my mother-in-law's, and it stated that all assets would go to my brother-in-law and his wife. "See, it's written here that we get everything, so unfortunately, you won't get any inheritance." "Too bad, huh?" My brother-in-law laughed mockingly, his expression ugly, while my husband looked bewildered. I stood up quietly and brought in the lawyer who had been waiting outside. "Ah, who is this?" my brother-in-law and his wife asked, puzzled by the sudden appearance of the lawyer. My husband, who didn't know the lawyer was there, was also surprised. "This person is the lawyer whom my mother-in-law trusted during her life," I explained briefly. My brother-in-law and his wife looked confused and then angry. "Why did you bring a lawyer here?" they demanded. "It's part of my mother-in-law's instructions. She wanted the lawyer here to help make sure the estate is divided fairly," I said. My brother-in-law and his wife insisted loudly that they didn't need a lawyer. My brother-in-law slammed his hand on the desk and pointed at the will, saying, "My mother left a will. We don't need a lawyer." The lawyer quietly raised his hand and asked, "Are you sure your mother wrote the entire will herself?" "That's obvious," my brother-in-law shouted back. The lawyer looked concerned and shook his head. "This can't be recognized as a valid will. A real handwritten will must be entirely written by the person it belongs to." He pointed out that only the words at the beginning and the signature at the end were in my mother-in-law's handwriting. The rest looked like it was printed from a computer. The room went quiet. My brother-in-law reached out to the will, but it still showed the same printed words. "Huh," suddenly my husband said. "Why is the back of the paper so clean?" I looked closely, and indeed, there was something odd. The handwriting in the signature section is different from the rest. Could this will be forged? I wondered aloud. My brother-in-law and his wife trembled at the lawyer's observation. "What are you talking about? We wouldn't do such a thing," they stammered. "Why are you so nervous if it's not forged?" the lawyer cut in. "Forging a will is a serious crime." Hearing this, my brother-in-law and his wife turned pale. Despite their agitated and confused excuses, the lawyer delivered the final blow. "Betty has a notarized will, so your will is invalid." "What?" my brother-in-law and his wife gasped, their eyes wide. "We never heard of that," they said. "In the letter I received from my mother-in-law, she mentioned that she hid a notarized will behind the hidden door of the chest. We didn't know about this earlier. The letter not only told us where she hid the will, but also explained why she made it and why she told me about it." My mother-in-law had been feeling her health decline and had prepared the will because she probably suspected that my brother-in-law and his wife might tamper with it. I thought she didn't know their true nature, but it seemed she had a sense of their greed. The notarized will stated that the assets would be divided equally between my brother-in-law and my husband. This surprised my brother-in-law and his wife, and their eyes went wide. Then my brother-in-law suddenly shouted, claiming he should be the beneficiary of our mother's life insurance as the eldest son. I calmly responded that the life insurance certificate was also with me, as per the mother-in-law's trust, and the beneficiary was me, not him. Inside the hidden door, there was not just the notarized will, but also the life insurance certificate. My brother-in-law and his wife couldn't believe it. They kept saying they knew nothing about this. The lawyer explained that changing the beneficiary of a life insurance policy doesn't necessarily require informing the original beneficiary. My brother-in-law was upset and slammed the table. My husband turned to me, anxious, and asked when his mom had entrusted these things to me. I smiled and explained that it was written in the letter from his mother. She had wanted to tell him too, but she was worried that if both of us knew, his brother and sister-in-law might become suspicious, so she trusted only me with the information. While my husband and I were talking, my sister-in-law burst in hysterically. She couldn't accept that we, who hadn't even shown her children to my mother-in-law, would inherit her estate. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "I can't accept this at all," my brother-in-law chimed in, his face turning red as he shouted. "You unlucky bunch have no right to Mom's estate. We were living here just for her inheritance, splitting it equally. Don't make me laugh. The inheritance is all ours," he continued. My sister-in-law joined in, shouting and adding to his selfish claims. "We have 4 children. As compensation for you not showing my mother-in-law any grandchildren, you should give all of her inheritance to our children for their future. We have shown her 4 grandchildren, so we are much more deserving than you." Despite my sister-in-law's aggressive tone, I stayed calm. "What you're saying doesn't make sense. Please calm down," I said. My calm demeanor seemed to infuriate her even more. "Your calm attitude annoys me so much. Just give us the money already. You're a useless, childless woman," she yelled and lunged at me. My husband and the lawyer stepped in, but before they could stop her, my sister-in-law punched me in the head. Ouch! She had several large rings on her fingers, so it felt like being hit with makeshift brass knuckles. I cried out in pain. "Stop it." My husband and the lawyer pulled my sister-in-law away, but she tried to reach for me again in her agitated state. "Give us the inheritance. I deserve it all more than you do. I have 4 children," she shouted, her eyes bloodshot and her face twisted with anger. My brother-in-law egged her on, encouraging her to hit me more. Enraged, my husband called the police. When the police arrived shortly after, he and the lawyer explained the situation. My brother-in-law and his wife were then escorted away by the police. My husband and I thanked the lawyer and decided to send him home for the day. What was supposed to be a discussion about creating an estate division agreement turned into a chaotic ordeal. My husband and I agreed to bring a gift of apology another day. He was deeply concerned about me being hit by my sister-in-law, but seemed relieved when I told him the headache had completely subsided after the tumultuous events. I murmured, "It's been quite an intense time." Then my husband brought up something unexpected. "Hey, Lisa seems to constantly talk about the children. You know, she always boasted about showing Mom 4 grandchildren and how great she was. And don't you think she's overly fixated on money?" Indeed, my sister-in-law had been excessively promoting her children and seemed really focused on money during the earlier argument. "Well, she has been quite vocal about the children for a while, and her obsession with money was indeed extreme. Her expression while hitting me was terrifying," I replied. "Yeah, you're right. It's a bit abnormal," he said, and then fell silent. "What's wrong? Is there something bothering you?" I asked, not understanding what he was getting at. "Well, there's something bothering me, and I'm considering suggesting it to my brother. I think it might be a good idea to have DNA tests done for their 4 children." My husband's response surprised me. "DNA tests?" "Yeah, and I'm also thinking about proposing a background check on Lisa. Something doesn't sit right with me. It's just a gut feeling." Although I thought it might be unnecessary, my husband's intuition had been accurate in the past. "Okay, if that's what you suggest, let's propose it to your brother later on," I agreed. When my husband told my brother-in-law about the idea, he ridiculed and yelled at him extensively. "Just because you don't have kids yourselves, don't doubt ours," my brother-in-law shouted. But before parting ways, he took some materials about DNA testing from my husband. Perhaps he had some doubts as well. The first revelation came from the DNA testing between my brother-in-law and his children. It turned out that 3 out of the 4 children didn't share his blood. I was a bit suspicious of the youngest child because they didn't look much like any of us, but I was surprised about the middle one too. My husband was speechless, and my brother-in-law decided to investigate his wife's background thoroughly. The results were shocking. It turned out that my sister-in-law had relationships with multiple men, even before marrying my brother-in-law. Recently, her affairs were discovered by the wives of her lovers, who then demanded compensation. Since my sister-in-law was at home more often than my brother-in-law, she was able to hide any evidence like registered letters. The compensation demanded was far more than she could afford from her earnings or savings. It became clear that she was determined to get her hands on my mother-in-law's inheritance at any cost. Eventually, the situation escalated, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law ended up in a violent fight, throwing things and hitting each other until the neighbors, unable to stand the noise, called the police. Both were taken into custody, facing charges for forging the will and now additional charges of assault. Further police investigation revealed they had committed theft and harassed wealthy individuals among other offenses. Eventually, they both ended up in jail. As for the future of the 4 children they left behind, my husband and I were deeply troubled. Since my mother-in-law's passing, we were the closest relatives. We considered taking them in, but decided against it after much thought. The children had been influenced so much by their parents that they casually insulted us as childless incompetents. The oldest at 19 should know right from wrong, and the youngest at 7 should understand proper behavior. Yet they smirked and insulted us every time they saw us, even with their parents in trouble. Our 16-year-old nephew said we'd be better off raised by childless idiots, which was more than we could bear. Facing such hostility, we couldn't find any affection for the children or any hope of raising them to be decent people. Ultimately, we contacted my sister-in-law's parents and decided to sever ties with the children. It seems the children understood our decision, as our nephew said, "I'd rather live in Grandma's old shack than with the brainless, childless couple." With those words, we felt it was best to leave things as they were. We haven't told the children that the younger 4 aren't biologically related to my brother-in-law. Whether we share this fact or not, we leave it to the relatives of my brother-in-law and his wife to decide. My husband and I decided to move to a distant place, using the inheritance from my mother-in-law to start anew. We moved to a place full of greenery and nature, where we quickly felt at home. There's a charming waffle shop near our house, and every time we pass by, we wish my mother-in-law could have visited it with us. Soon after the move, I found out I was pregnant. When the Prig-Betty test showed a positive result, I couldn't help but scream with surprise and happiness. Later, the doctor confirmed that I was indeed pregnant. Both my husband and I cried tears of joy as we hugged each other. My mother-in-law would have been so happy if she were still alive. Additionally, the business plan I had been secretly preparing is progressing well. Both my husband and I are working hard, looking forward to the arrival of our child and enjoying fulfilling days full of happiness.